good evening and welcome to the Sunday night Reef Talk live stream. Let's see who we've got in the house. In fact, the first comment I'm going to pin in a second. I'll come back to you. In fact, the first few comment, because it made me laugh a lot. And it is the weirdest comment I've ever had on a live stream. We have Zayed in the house, John Wright, One-Armed Reefer, Salkio, the owner of the weirdest and funniest comment of the day. Anton Tar, where are you, Anton Tar? Actually, you know what? I'll come back to that as well. We also have Dawn Barrett, evening everyone who is in from Yorkshire. Andy Parsons, presumably not the comedian. John Wright, presumably not the former Liverpool footballer. Colin Garvey, UKM 120, Doug Dorrit from Frag Farm, Mark Martin, Les the admin, Chris Allen, Lancashire Reef, Marek, Puthcheck, and this is Salkio. This video topic could not come of a better time, leaving for the EU soon, and this would definitely help me. Right, excellent. K20 Charge Mini, Howard Farley from sunny Portsmouth, good lad. Mark Cherry, I used to live just outside Portsmouth in Havant, or near Havant, if you know. Billy Sherwood, UK Reef Bro, Vince Loves Fish, Jason Bourne, who says, my boy, Sean Parrish, Fish for Life. Hello, can I get Shadow? Can I get Shadow? I don't understand. Hi. Who else we have? Brad was here 101, like the little thingy majig avatar thing. Hang on, I skipped one. Pompey Reefer, evening, all looking forward to this. Packed for holiday, good vibes. Dylan is here as well. Aquarian is in the house. Paddy Mac is off to Tenerife. Whoop, whoop. Curtis Obard is in the house as well. Fish for Life. Can I get a shout out? Yes, you can get a shout out, Fish for Life. Smoking Kippers. Evening, all 50th birthday today. Very happy birthday to you, Smoking Kippers. Pompey Reefer again. Brinley Hughes leaving for 1 week on holiday tomorrow. Not sure if this will help my tank anxiety. Lol. It will. And the last thing I'm going to say when I've gone through my list of things that you need to be careful of and things that could go wrong is very good news, and will hopefully set you at mind a little bit. We also have Canadian Reefer from Canada. LS10 Works, who's just about to go away, of course. And I've just been away on holiday last week, which is why I'm doing this today. We have Matt Petrie, evening from Somerset, UK. Just got my first clownfish today. LS10 Works, perfect timing. Matt Green, and finally from Switzerland, Manon Tupin. Good evening, everybody. We are going to kick off then. So today we're going to be talking about holiday preparation. So as I said, I went away last week to Malta for 5 days, something like that. And let me start by bringing up the the photo from this, the cover photo for the thumbnail. So that was this one. So I came back from my holiday. Sorry, Manon. I'm just going to get rid of that. So I came back from my holiday to this coral dead. The good news is that was the only thing that was that didn't make it, that was dead basically when I got back. So everything, I think that's a bit of a success, to be completely honest with you. But nonetheless, it is not necessarily good news to come back to a dead coral. Actually, that coral didn't die because of anything I did before I went away on holiday, but I think, and I actually don't know what killed it. It was very strange that everything else in my tank was absolutely fine. Literally no signs of illness or in any coral, no sign of bleaching at all. Everything is spot on. That coral itself had been looking for, I don't know, a couple of months maybe, had been looking a little bit faded. It's not that it, I don't know, it was just kind of, it wasn't showing its best colours. It hadn't gone brown, but it had lost its colours. When I first got it, it was really bright. And it came from another hobbyist tank, and I know it's a strong enough coral. And I just got back and it was stripped. I've got no idea what happened. It happened about 3 days into the holiday, because I had someone coming in to feed the tank, which I'll come on to later. And they showed a video, and it was stripped at that point. So I don't know what happened. I suspect it's because I changed my lights recently, 3 weeks ago, something like that, 4 weeks ago. And I suspect it was that kicked it over the edge, because it probably wasn't healthy, because it was faded, not showing its best colours, and had been for months. And I suspect that changing the lights gave it, maybe it got a boost of par too much, Maybe it didn't like the change for whatever other reason, and that tipped it over the edge from being nice and healthy to stripping out completely and dying. But whatever, it's one tiny coral. It's not the end of the world. A shame to let it go, but that was okay. So actually, that wasn't related to the holiday planning, but there are a couple of things I did before the holiday that were that probably helped mitigate any problems, and that's what I want to talk about today. So I'll just catch up with a couple of other comments as well before we kick in, just so we can let a few other people join as well. Zayed, how many gallons should I put a blue tang in? Blue tang as in a dory, a hippo tang. I think they're probably 5 foot or bigger tank, ideally. They'll be okay in smaller tanks for a little while, to be completely honest, because they come in quite small and they take a little bit of time to grow, but they're not massively slow growers. So longer term, look at Live Aquarium and see what they say. That's where I always go. I guess that would say about 125 gallons, but I would say 5 or 6 feet, certainly long term, because they're anything with their scientific name, I think, is Paracantharus hepatus, and anything with Acantharus in it, any tang with the name Acantharus in it, is a fish that needs a lot of space. So as much space as you can possibly get in. Although I've never kept one, I should say. Lyndon Gall is from Yorkshire as well. That was what I was going to say. So first off, we've had a few people saying where you guys are from. Let me know in the comment section or in the chat where you're watching from. Really interested to see where everybody is today. Germany Traveller as well in the house. One Ogo, Reefing John, Burgess Hill. Very nice. But currently in Florida. Ooh, I wonder if you're watching, if you've gone to, is there Reef for Palooza, or is that a couple of months away? I think that's a couple of months away. But no doubt you're going to Worldwide Corals and Top Shelf Aquatics, maybe. What else have we got? Okay, so a few other people chiming in as well. I won't go through everyone because I'll be there all night. But one thing, Fishbone 3D Prints, obviously a follower of Reef Talk on Instagram. I got engaged this week, so thank you very much. Really cool news, and I'm very excited. And there we go, from Southsea Portsmouth. There we go. Who else is in the house? So Colorado, USA, South Africa, Cape Town, Salkio. Right. Do you know what? Before we crack on then onto the other where you guys are from and the subject tonight, this is the weirdest comment I've ever had. This is on a video that's about going away on holiday, and Salkio says, technically, if you're starting a brand new tank, the ammonia in your pee would kickstart the process. I mean, what do I say to that? And Lyndon Gall says apparently they used to use that in freshwater tanks. Seahawks rule, thought that was hilarious, and I thought it was hilarious as well. And it made me think, well, you know, it's a bit left field, of course, but if you when you're cycling a tank, ammonia leads to nitrite and then of course nitrate. So if you've got low nitrates in your tank, maybe the answer is to start using it as a toilet and bring them up that way. I don't know. Thinking outside the box. I like it, Salkio. I appreciate a bit of lateral thinking. Anyway, so that's where Salkio is from, Cape Town, South Africa. Billy Sherwood is from South London, presumably South London in the UK. Not there are places, I think maybe even in South Africa called South London. Anyway, Kyle is from Malta. Oh, you're from Malta. Were you the guy I messaged on Ultimate Reef? I tried to find a couple of shops, local fish shops in Malta. I ran out of time in the end, so I didn't get to go. Andy Parsons is from North Wales. Nitrox is from Norwich. We got Whitney, Wickford in Essex, Oxfordshire, Pennsylvania, US, Sittingbourne, Kent, down on the coast, Hereford, Milton, Portsmouth, Leeds, Yorkshire, Australia, Bonza, Illinois, US, Isle of Wight, yeah, another Yorkshire reefer, Torquay, Devon. I wonder if you're near Torbay, and you're from. I'm Wakey. What? Oh, right, you're sorry, Wakefield. You're talking to each other. Derry, Northern Ireland, Farnborough. That's just up the road from me. I'm in Woking. You must have gone to Lynchford Aquatics. Anyway, a couple more questions, and then we'll crack back on with the stuff. Found a Red Sea 900 XXL for $7,500 with 4 Radion XR40s, XR40, XR30, and a full Neptune system, and also 4 MP40s. It's 240 gallons. That sounds like a pretty sweet deal. I don't know about the cost of the tank. Don't know how much they are, but that sounds like a very good deal indeed. If you do buy it, check the wet sides. Take them completely apart of the MP40s. Take the cage off and then pull the impeller out and make sure there's no rust and there's no damage, because MP40s can go that way. Anyway, we've got... Ooh, that was the other thing. In fact, Second weirdest comment of the night. Doug Dorrit is in my basement, which is good because you must be sitting there with Prestige Reef in my basement in the Fritzl suite. Totton, Southampton. So Mark Cherry, that was the other thing I was going to say before we do kick in. And Aquarian will come back onto this because I take the opposite view. What am I doing in September? You could start a feature on feeding other people's tanks, maybe. But Totton, Southampton. So in the UK, there's a shop called Reef Dreams, which is currently based in Winchester. It's one of the best shops in the country, probably certainly top 5, I would say, or certainly top 5 of the ones I visited in the south of England. It's been around for a number of years, and they are moving to Totton in Southampton, I think in the next week or two. Certainly from the looks of it, from what I can make out on Facebook, by the end of May, they'll be in Totton in Southampton, Reef Dreams 2.0. So if you've never heard of them, and if you're in the area, go down and check it out. It'll be worth a visit. I'm going to try to get down there as soon as I can after opening. More locations: Falkirk, Scotland, John Wright's from Skegness, Wigan, Ludlow Shrops, Lancashire, Chris Allen, Lancashire, Swindon, Wiltshire, of course, and so on and so forth. You deleted Mark Cherry's comment. What did Mark Cherry say? I can't remember now, but I'm sure it was very funny. Anyway, right. So that's all the admin stuff got out of the way, as I always say at the start. So holidays then, right? So what checks should you do? I'm going to leave that comment up there actually, so I know where to go back to. So what checks should you do before you go away? Well, first thing is, and the key thing I think is that you don't want to be doing anything within a week of going away on holiday, anything at all, pretty much. But the checks you want to make before you go away in the last week or so, and certainly some of these are, to be fair, are a day before, just checking everything. Check your ATO, obviously, is full and has got enough water to last the time you're away. If you're away for a long period of time, if you're away for 2 weeks and your ATO reservoir only lasts a week, just get a massive vat and put the pump in that, or or get someone to come in and put some fresh water in a barrel right by it and ask them to top it up. More on that later. Get an auto feeder as well. And this isn't a check as such, but I have a couple of these battered up old Eheim single auto feeders. They're really good. They're just very effective, and they're very reliable, and they just drop in a tiny amount of food. But in terms of setting up auto feeders, you really don't want to be doing that the day before you go away. Topping up fresh water, of course, you want to top up the day before, so you've got as much water as possible. But setting up auto feeders, you want to be doing that days in advance. Because, for example, with this, I'm not even going to be able to show you, it won't show up on camera, but with the Eheim one, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to dial in how much food it dispenses. Let's see if I can show you. There we go. So this is the opening, and that's that. If it's like that, no food will ever come out. If it's like that, too much food will come out. And sometimes you might have to, I often have to put a piece of sellotape, hang on, put a piece of sellotape over it to hold it in place. So you want to set that up days in advance, ideally a week before, so you know it's all running smoothly. Dosing containers, make sure you've got your dosing containers full, of course, so you're going to have enough dosing liquids to last you. Food though, yeah, so food, auto feeders are great, but if you're going away, if you don't have one, don't sweat it. These are only, the Eheim ones are only about 40 quid, and you can get them even cheaper on eBay. But I wouldn't sweat it too much with food. And this is one thing that I used to stress about a lot in my early days of reefing, and I don't stress about at all now. So less is more, basically. I would rather, certainly if I'm going away for a week, 2 weeks might be pushing it, but probably still okay, to be completely honest. But if I'm going away for a week or less, I'm not really bothered if my fish are getting fed or not. So my tank to my left of me, the little water box Frag 55.2, that's about 150 litres, what's that, 40 odd gallons. I didn't feed that when I went away this time around. I was only away for 5 days, from Tuesday to Saturday, and I didn't bother feeding it. I had someone coming in to feed the cat, but I didn't leave them instructions to feed this tank because of the reasons I'll come on to in a sec. But really the point with feeding is less is more. And I would far rather my fish have no food at all for a week, say, than have too much food. And this is the point Aquarian made earlier on about getting, maybe you make it, I can't remember, but talking about giving people permission to come into your house or whatever, or getting a friend or a neighbor to stop in and feed your fish. I really don't like doing that. So my partner's mother came in and fed the cat on 2 occasions, and then put down food timers for the cat. And I, at first, for a start, the tank I've got up here, I said, just don't touch it, just leave it. Don't put any food in at all. The tank downstairs, my main tank, I did ask her to pop some food in twice. She was here on 2 days, so I just asked her to feed twice. And normally in the 5 days that I was away, I would have fed 10 times. So obviously the fish are getting a bit less food, but that's absolutely fine. And the key thing with, if you do trust someone else, ideally if you know someone who knows about fish keeping, but even then, that's not necessarily safe. But if you've just got someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or who you don't necessarily trust, and as I will say regularly on these live streams, I don't trust anybody, you need to leave really specific instructions on feeding, to the point that you want to be borderline patronizing in what you're saying, as if you're stating the bleeding obvious. And I would far rather risk offending a friend or family member by being a bit condescending to them in the instructions than risk them going off and doing their own thing. So the only thing I did with the person who stopped in and fed my tank, who was perfectly capable of feeding a tank, but I still don't trust them, is I always put my frozen food in these little pots. They're made by Systema. They're the little food, I don't know what these are for, like some kind of sauces or whatever, but I put them in these pots, and I put 2 cubes of frozen in there. And this is how I feed my fish all the time anyway. So a load of these in the freezer. And I just said, on the 2 days that she was here, I asked her to pop the contents of one of these containers into the tank. And I had a little, that I can't find now, a little frozen food defrosting device. But you don't want them to be doing anything remotely that involves their judgment. If you say, for example, if you're using pellet food and you say, just put a shake of the tub in, classic example of that. Let me grab my my pellet food. Classic example of that. And actually, I've just found this is the frozen food defrosting device. So the easy thing to do was, all she had to do was empty this into here. This sits in the tank and then it defrosts over time. So that's really good. But you don't trust anybody. So with pellet food, for example, this is a really good example. And I've done this myself before. So these, of course, all have, often these have 2 openings. This side is, this side, there you go, you can see is relatively small holes. Whereas this side is an absolute gaping hole. And I've accidentally shoveled a load of food from the big hole in to my tank before, and the fish have gone crazy. And then I probably had a massive nitrate spike. But if you were to say, look, just put a pinch of food in or a shake of food in, well, are they going to use the big one or the little one? And the chances are, because when you feed fish for the first time ever, fish go crazy. If you feed fish, even if they've been fed 3 times in a day, you feed fish, they all go absolutely mental, don't they? They swim around all over the place. And if you're seeing that for the first time, the natural reaction is, oh God, they must be really hungry. I should feed them more. And they will keep eating and eating and eating. They don't have limits. So you want to give really specific instructions, to the point that you don't say a pinch of food. I would actually, if you don't use frozen food like this in these pots, and that's, I find, the best way. But the problem with that is, if you don't have something like a little frozen defroster, you might you pop the frozen cube straight into the tank. Half the time that might go straight down the weir box. But if you don't use frozen food, get something like these pots anyway, and measure out the exact amount. So if you're away for 5 days and you want the fish fed 5 times, measure out 5 individual servings. Be really specific. Even label them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, as direct as you can do, to the point of, like I say, being patronizing. Just be really, really precise with your instructions, because people will get it wrong, and it's not their fault. It'll be your fault for not being specific enough. And overfeeding is a massive one with that. So that's feeding, and just less is more is the best way. I would be perfectly happy leaving my fish for a week without food. 2 weeks, they're probably fine, but I'd rather not leave them without food for a fortnight. But even then, they'll probably be okay. I have a copper-banded butterfly, of course, who's a finicky feeder, and they're notorious for going on hunger strike if you look at them funny. Slight exaggeration, but I did wonder to myself, do you know what? Is he going to be a bit funny about feeding when I get back? But there was no worry whatsoever. He was absolutely fine. So don't worry too much about underfeeding, but do worry about overfeeding, because you don't want your nutrients to spike whilst you're away. Sitter, yeah. So very specific instructions with sitters. Scraping algae the day before is a really good idea as well, especially if you've got someone coming into your house. So what I would say is that you don't want to make any changes at all within a day or two, and ideally a week before you go away, with the exception of scraping your algae off. Because if you scrape your algae off, if you've got someone coming in, then they'll be able to see much more easily. And if you've got a little webcam, which I didn't have, and that was one of my mistakes, if you've got a little webcam, then you need to set that up, and of course you won't be able to see so well if you've got algae all over your glass. However, that is the only change I allow myself to make, basically, the day before going away. And my general rule is that I don't make any changes at all, even good changes. And this is after I've been bitten in the past by making good changes the evening before I'm going away. So there was one time and when I say good changes, I mean, like, you might be thinking, do you know what? I'll calibrate my dosing pumps, or I'll clean my skimmer, or I'll scrape off some algae from the downpipes, this sort of thing. That was one thing I did once. The evening before I went on holiday, I cleaned the downpipes, the plumbing, and that felt like a great idea. They were really clogged. There was algae all over them. I thought, fantastic, this is doing the right thing. Obviously, as soon as I did that, they became much more efficient. So water started pouring down them, which meant that I had to adjust the plumbing and adjust the return pumps, and spend probably, I can't remember how long it took me, but it took me a good few hours to get them all right and dialed back in so it wasn't glugging and making an awful noise. And that meant I was up till about 3 a.m. that night, messing around with these pumps, trying to get them spot on again. So any cleaning whatsoever is a no-no. Even cleaning your skimmer cup. Empty your skimmer cup by all means, but cleaning your skimmer cup, sometimes skimmers are a bit temperamental, aren't they? And they can just go crazy if you clean them, and either they overskim or they underskim, and you really don't want that. So even some changes that you might consider to be good, don't do them. Calibrating your dosing pumps is another one, really tempting to do. But if you recalibrate your dosing pumps the day before you go away, let's say they were out by 20%, now they might be dosing 20% more liquid than they were before, or 20% less liquid, and then that's trouble. So it's far better for them to stay wrong for another week or two than for you to correct them and get them right and let them go on. If you're going to make those changes a week or two early, no problem. That's probably the best way to do it. But if you're disorganized like me and like a lot of people, just leave it. Far better to not do anything. And that's really for a week before. And in terms of bigger changes, like adding a fish or adding new equipment, I almost added a dosing pump once and started dosing for the first ever time the week before I went on holiday. And again, that felt like a good change, because actually I tested my alkalinity, it was really low. But had I done so, I would have you're not there to monitor it and change it, which is what you need to do. When you start dosing, you can't just start dosing, press the button, turn it on, and it's fine. You need to dial it in, and it takes time, especially if it's your first time ever doing it. So big changes like that, if you're going to start dosing, change any new equipment over, put a skimmer on, this sort of thing, don't do that for at least, ideally, a month before. The chances are it will be absolutely fine. It won't cause problems, but sod's law says it will cause a problem. You'll buy a new skimmer and you won't be able to get it dialed in, and it'll just be bubbling over all the time, and then you won't know what to do, whether to leave it on or turn it off. And fish, yeah, so don't buy anything for at least a week before. Fish is a particularly bad one, and I would never buy fish within at least a week of going away on holiday, and ideally a month or maybe even longer. And the problem with that is, if you're introducing a new fish, you are opening yourself up to the prospect of potential diseases. It's pretty unlikely, as long as you follow the right process of selecting a right specimen, making sure there's no signs of ick on that fish or any other fish in the shop, certainly any other fish in the same system. But nonetheless, it can happen. It can happen. So don't risk adding a fish a week before, because if you were to do that, suddenly the chances are the white spots will either come out the day before you fly away, and then you'll be panicking and wondering what to do, or even worse, potentially, they'll come on whilst you're away, and you'll get back to a tank full of dead fish, and you won't know what caused it. So don't buy any fish at all. I'm not so fussed about buying corals so close to going away. Although if you're buying big corals on a tank that doesn't have many corals, or even if you're buying big corals on a tank that does have corals, that can change your alkalinity consumption and your calcium consumption quite a significant amount. There are times on my tank now, because it's ram-packed full of corals, it doesn't make that much difference. But in the early days, when I added a couple of corals, it made a big difference. So if you do that, do it a couple of weeks before, and then just test to make sure your levels are all good. Don't buy anything. Yeah, and the other thing with if you were to buy a fish and it got a disease outbreak, it would ruin your holiday, and all you'd be thinking about, you'd be stressing about, wondering what your fish are going to be doing and if they're going to be okay. That's a real big one for me. Camera. So I have a webcam. I have a little what's it called? IP cam, I think it's called. I got it off Amazon for 40 quid or something. It was advertised as 1080p HD, and I'm sure technically it has that many pixels, but the quality of the webcams, and certainly cheap webcams, is not very good. And in fact, I've even seen expensive webcams like the Nest webcam and the Google equivalent, I can't remember what it's called, Google Home, whatever it's called. Those ones, the quality isn't that great. So don't expect to be able to see everything in real fine detail, to be able to see your fish close up, your corals close up. However, the good thing about having a camera is that it will just let you check in and see if everything is if there's any obvious problem. And by that, what I mean is, if you check in at 3 p.m. and all your lights are off, you might be able to check in and figure out why that's happened. Or if there's absolutely no water movement whatsoever. It's quite difficult, I found, on my Wi-Fi cam. And if you've got any recommendations for good Wi-Fi cams, share them in the comments below so people can see them. But my Wi-Fi cam, I find, even with a 1080p one, you can't really see the water movement that well. But you can tell the difference between none and some, and that's all you really need. Ideally, it would be good to have one in the sump as well, if you've got enough light. Because if, for example, if your display tank is completely still, you might be able to see in the sump, has your return pump died or whatever. There'll be something that will give you more information if you've got it in the sump. Probably a little bit overkill, but it's not necessarily the worst idea in the world. And I kind of regretted not having a camera when I went away this time. I've had it before. The only thing with it, though, with having a camera, is you tend to check in quite a lot. I used to just like log onto my phone and, like, when I'm at the bar drinking a pina colada or whatever, just like enjoying the sunset in the most beautiful country you've ever been to, and then you're like, oh, I wonder what my fish tank is up to. So that's a mistake as well, obsessing too much. Listen to your right. So the mistake I made of this when I went away on holiday was I made a change the day before. Now, I run Calcquasa, as many of you will know. I started, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. And my Calcquasa vat needed topping up before I went away. I knew it wasn't going to have enough. And the day before, I added enough to last me to get me through the 5 days, basically. And that caused a problem, because this is another idea. This is another example of a good change that you don't want to make so close, because it's, of course, a good thing that I'm adding more Calcquasa, so it doesn't run dry, and so that maintains consistency. But with adding the new Calcquasa, it increased the potency, because the old stuff had been sitting around for 3 weeks or so, and so it lost some of its potency. So I added new stuff. It was a bit more potent. That meant my pH spiked a little bit and my alkalinity spiked a little bit. I very much doubt that's what caused the coral to die, but it's the sort of thing that if it was worse, it could have gone very wrong indeed. And in fact, the reason I mentioned that in particular, and I'm going to bring up my Reef Factory dashboard, is, let's load this up. So KH Keeper Plus, and this takes us on to the next point as well. So first off, I changed my my calculator, which I shouldn't have done, or I should have done a week ago. And the point of that is that if there is a problem with the change you make, if you've got a week in which to fix it, you're golden and you're not going to have any problems. Whereas if you've only got a day or two to fix it, you're going to be tearing your hair out and stressing about it, and you might not even be able to fix it. The other thing is testing equipment. In fact, I'll come back onto that when I've told you about this. Okay, it's important if you've got automatic testers. It's really important to listen to them, but don't necessarily be guided by them. And this is, I've talked in some videos before about getting to know your tank and why it's so important. This is obvious. I'm sure a lot of this is obvious, to be fair, but why it's so important to test your parameters fairly regularly. And this is pot, kettle black, because I don't test that often, but fairly regularly, so you know what levels your tank is sitting at, and you know when a change happens, what effect that has. So you might turn your lights up, which means your alkalinity consumption increases or whatever. You might feed more, so your phosphate goes up. So you'll be able to spot those things and know your tank. And the reason that's so important is because of this. So, and this isn't showing as well, but these are my alkalinity results from the last, from the time I was away. And it was 6th of May was like the third day I was there. But the day before I went away, my alkalinity went from 8 to 12. And I suddenly thought, what the hell, 8 to 12? Went down and checked to make sure nothing was dosing too much, a dosing pump was stuck on or whatever. That was the case. That was not the case. Everything was fine. And I thought it was very weird. I then started getting all these really random results. It kept going up and up, 12, 13, 14. And as you can see here, it went 14.2, 15, 15, 15, back to 14.2, back to 13.7, down to 12.5, back up to 13, etc., etc., etc. Now, that happened the day before I went away. I didn't touch it. I hadn't changed anything with it. It just suddenly started reading randomly really high. And I actually woke up in the morning, 6 a.m., an hour before I had to leave, checked my alkalinity, and it said my alkalinity was 12 when the day before it had been 8. So I suddenly thought, oh, what am I going to do with this? But I checked everything was okay and left it, because I thought, you know what, there's no sign. The corals all look fine. There's no obvious sign of a problem with a dosing pump being stuck on or whatever. So I think it's probably okay. And actually, when these test results started coming in, going higher and higher and higher, I was trying to work out what that could be that caused it. And this is why it's really useful to know your tank, because realistically, the only thing that could have caused that, or the only things that could have caused that, are if a dosing pump was stuck on, say I was dosing too much calcwatter or dosing too much two-part dosing liquids, then that could cause it, because of course that pushes your alkalinity up. Or if, for example, my lights had failed and the lights were off, so then my corals aren't uptaking the alkalinity, so therefore it would increase. But that didn't make any sense. And this is when it was really useful actually to have backup test results as well. So these are completely non-essential, but they are useful for this. So my pH, for example, I have a pH meter, and on the day when I think it was the 6th or 7th of May, wasn't it? So here we go. So on the day when my alkalinity was showing as 15, supposedly 12, 13, 14, 15, my pH was 8.47, which is roughly what it normally is. The trough was 8.25. So once I checked my alkalinity results, I looked at my pH meter and I thought, if my alkalinity had suddenly doubled overnight when my dosing liquids were fine, my lights were all fine, there didn't seem to be any problems. If that had happened, my pH would have been going crazy as well. Or potentially, and I have a salinity monitor as well, potentially my salinity would have been all over the place. I checked in on the salinity as well, and where are we? 7th of May, 34.2 parts per thousand. So no great shakes. A little bit lower than I'd like it, but whatever. It doesn't matter at all, and that's roughly where it sits. So that's why I found it really useful to have several sets of data. And in fact, there was one more thing as well. This is slightly less important, but temperature. And my temperature, there you go. It's pretty much rock solid, although it's been a bit warmer lately. So I've had a couple of spikes. There you go. So there you can see summertime in the UK. Got to 25 degrees the other day. Wow, mega hot. Anyway, so I checked the alkalinity monitor and I thought, why is it going up? That's strange. Checked the obvious things. And then I checked all my other parameters. pH was fine. Salinity was fine. Temperature was fine. Temperature is the least useful of those, but particularly pH and salinity. And I thought, well, do you know what? The chances are then everything's fine. But I was still racking my brains trying to think what could have caused the alkalinity to spike so much. And I couldn't come up with anything at all. So I decided I'm going to ignore the test results and just leave them to it, because I know my tank and I know that actually that's probably a false reading. Now, almost always I've had funny readings before with my KH keeper, and every time I think, oh, it's stupid, it doesn't know what it's doing, I go down and check with a HANA checker, and surprise, surprise, it's bang on. And there's some reason that's caused it. Actually, on the other thing I did on the morning I left, when these results came in, I did a check with a HANA checker, and it said 7.5 or whatever when the KH keeper was reading 12. So I knew, with that in mind, as well as all these other readings, that everything was probably fine. So do look at your test results, but your auto testers, but don't necessarily take them for gospel. And the reason I say that is because when I got back, I cracked open, and now I'm scrolling through my phone trying to find the photos. I cracked open the KH keeper, and I thought, right, let's sit down and figure out exactly what's gone on here. And I do have a photo of it, so I can show you. Where are we? That's weird. I appear to have deleted it. Anyway, so I had a look at the KH keeper and decided to diagnose it. I figured some calibration was off or something like that. And it turns out the reagent tube, the little bendy airline, basically, the dosing line, had come off. And normally when that happens, it means it doesn't add any reagent whatsoever into the sample. And then my test result would always read 15. So you know there's a fault. But because this was reading 12, 13, 15, 14, 11, 12, and all that all over the place, it didn't. I didn't register that was what was happening. And actually, the dosing tube was still spitting some reagent into the beaker, but it was spitting some elsewhere. So that's what happened. It just popped off because of too much pressure or whatever. I've now fixed that, no problem, nice and easy. But the point is, listen to your testers. But if you know your tank and you know everything's fine, don't necessarily trust them. Because the other thing I could have done with that is start, because my alkalinity was really high, I could have reduced my dosing significantly to counter that. And I didn't do so. Actually, I took about 20% off the dosing, because I thought, you know what, if in the case it is right, I would rather be dosing too little, and dosing 20% too little for a week is absolutely fine. But don't just go crazy and think, right, I need to stop dosing altogether to rectify this. Make sure you just think about your tank. And if you know your tank well, so much the better. The other thing then, because this is summer, so in the UK it's pretty cold most of the year round, and then it gets a little bit hot in the summer for like 3 weeks, and our tank temperatures go up. You've seen on my my graph that my tank temperature has spiked by like 0.5 degree centigrade, so like a degree Fahrenheit, in the last couple of weeks. And that's one thing. If you've got a temperature controller, if you're anything like me, you'll have the little cooling fans like these. I don't set these up. I don't put them on my tank until we get to the summer. Oh, dusty. I don't put them on my tank until we get to the summer, because they're ugly and I want them out of the way. So set them up a week in advance before you go away on holiday, because the chances are if you're going away on holiday, it's probably going to be hot in the UK. So you want to make sure you're covered on that. One actually last thing on this, these are called Boyu cooling fans, the ones I bought, I don't know, a year or so ago. These are from All Pond Solutions in the UK. You can buy the most popular cooling fans in the UK are from DD, and they are the exact same thing. You would not, if you spent an hour looking at them, you would not find a difference. The DD fans are twice the price. These are dirt cheap. So All Pond Solutions for your cooling fans is a really good place to go. So set up fans, again, ideally a week before, so you can make sure you adjust it properly and get it dialed in, all that sort of stuff. And what else? And yeah, the final mistake that I want to talk about is obsessing about your tank whilst you're away. It's really easy to do. This time I didn't. When those crazy KH results came in, I started fretting a little bit, but I didn't fret too much. And I've done that in the past, where I've been constantly checking in every day, a few times a day, on my phone, looking at the camera, thinking about it, wondering if it's okay. and it takes away your enjoyment of the holiday. The reality is that your tanks, although there are all these things that can go wrong and things that I've got wrong in the past, the chances are your tank's going to be absolutely fine when you get back. And people often report on forums and Facebook groups that tanks are much better when you've been away, because you've not put your hands in the tank. You've not had your hands in your tank doing all sorts of things. I spoke to a friend of mine, I don't know, a year or so ago, who had a better theory about why tanks look much better when you get back from holiday. It wasn't because people have their, he doesn't think it's because, oh, battery's dead. That's really annoying. Give me 1 sec. And I will change over. I know you can still hear me, so we're all good. And I'm just going to pop that out, pop that back in, and we are back in action. There we go. Right. Zoom and focus. There we go. Good stuff. So I was talking to a friend recently, or a year or so ago, whose theory was that when you go away and you come back and your tank looks really good, it's not because you haven't had your hand in the tank with all your oils or whatever you've got on your hands. It's because you haven't had your family in the living room breathing and exhaling pH. So therefore exhaling CO2. So therefore your pH has gone up, and that's why your tank is better. And that, I think, makes as a theory makes much more sense to me. But anyway, the point is, the chances are if you leave your tank alone, it will be absolutely fine when you get back, and you won't have anything to worry about whatsoever. So the most important thing, it's really hard, but don't stress too much when you go away on holiday. Your tank will be fine, especially if you take measures and prepare a couple of weeks in advance. You don't have anything to worry about. I know what it's like. They're our pride and joy, aren't they? They're animals at the end of the day. They're pets, and we really do stress about it. But just try not to worry too much, because the chances are everything will be okay. Right, let's catch up with the chat and see what else we've got going on. Let's have a look. Billy Sherwood says, have you heard of the Aquatic Design Centre in South London? I work there. It was definitely worth a visit. I have not. I work in London as well. But what is it, a shop or what is it? Let me know. Uploads by Tom. My LED light in my T5 hybrid recently died. Do you think an IT Evergrow 5012 V2 paired with two T5 bulbs would be a good combo? And is 300 quid for the Evergrow a fair price? I'm going to be selling my Evergrows for probably around 300 quid, 5012 V2. So that is probably a fair price, as long as they're not more than 2 or 3 years old. So yeah, that's probably about right. And yeah, that's a very good combination indeed, for sure. We've got Mick D'Souza in from Welwyn Garden City, Pierre Leader from Luxembourg, Fragmaster from your favourite LFS, which must be Reef Keeper Windsor, or the Ocean Project, or Reef Dreams. Ty Fairclough. I'm going away for 3 weeks. I've got water automated, as in water changes, but feeding, I'm struggling to think of a good way to prepare the food for my housekeeper. Yeah. So I've answered that question already, that you've probably already seen. Get these little Sistema pots, measure out the exact amounts, and label them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and leave written instructions, or even better, take a little video showing them exactly what to do, to the point that you're saying, unscrew the top, hold it over the tank, pour it in, shake it, make sure you pour it in the right area, all those sorts of things. Be as direct as you can, and clearing be as clear as you can. So that's what I would do. Ian Rodber. So this is evening, Ian. How you doing? This is the guy I was talking about who had the theory that it's pH is why your tank looks so much better when you get back from holiday. You're in Milton too. Oh right, Milton, as in yeah, Milton. Yeah, that's near Guildford, right? I think. JBL Auto Feeder is a good option. So I've tried a couple. These Eheim ones are the best for me. Eheim is a really reputable company, so to get one like this for 40 quid, I think is a really good deal. What else have we got going on? Jo has, I have an old piece of plastic stuck in the inside of my auto feeder to extend the ramp, and it gives a bit of more control over the amount of food that comes out. Like that, yeah, I can picture exactly what you mean. Yeah, good, like it a lot. I've done a similar thing with tin foil before, where I wrap a little tin foil hood over the edge, sellotape around it so it sticks it in place, and then angle it so it points down, and then when it turns, it it pushes the food a little bit further out into the tank. You can find if you set up an auto feeder in the obvious place by the overflow weir box, all the food just goes straight down the weir box. So you want it at the opposite end if you can do. What else have we got? Do the same. Not feeding for 3 to 5 days. Never had a problem. And I will be surprised if you come across many people who've had problems not feeding fish for 3 or 4 days. Certainly a week. If you've not fed your fish for a week and it dies, the chances are it wasn't healthy beforehand. And actually, my foxface fish, some of you guys have noticed, he's looking a bit skinny at the moment and has been for quite a while now, to be fair. And he still was absolutely fine. Although, to be fair, he could eat whatever algae was in the tank. But your fish would have to be in a pretty sorry condition not to survive, unless you have something like a shoal of antheas or chromis, because they do need to feed quite regularly, and they might be more susceptible. But generally, fish that, for the most part, are going to be absolutely fine. So I really wouldn't worry about it. I diluted with IDI since the main ingredient is purified water. You must be talking to someone else because I'm not quite sure what you're saying. Dan Max, been watching your content for a while now. Really good content. Just got an Aqua One Mini Reef 120. I've had 2 of them. They're really good. Not set up yet. Coming from freshwater for 10 years. Excellent. Welcome to the hobby. Nice little tank. Decent sized sump. So you've got some good options. Yeah, and quite cheap as well, to be fair. Yeah, good tanks that. Nice choice. In your opinion, would these be sufficient to have a good calcium in all levels? I'm not sure. Would what be sufficient to have good calcium in all levels, or should I dose those as well? I might have missed a comment from you, so apologies if I have. But explain what you mean, because I'm missing something. Jason Wilcox is in from Llandudno, which I no doubt pronounced incorrectly. Answer my cue with pots. Exactly right. The pots are great, and these are. You can get the equivalents of these on Amazon. These are expensive versions. I say they're expensive. They're like £5 for 4, but you can get cheaper ones. But anything like that, it doesn't necessarily have to be these, but anything like that. And in the past, I've even made little tinfoil parcels and tied them all up. But anything that you can measure out the food and put them in a little pot, that's best. These pots are just so good because you can label them Monday to Friday. They've got a lid, so they're airtight and all that sort of stuff. Kevin Twine finally started. Oh, that's your avatar is from that Ricky Gervais program. I can't remember what it's called. Started my reef journey, and I have 2 common clowns and Midas Blenny. After what your videos, and I'm loving. Thank you very much for your efforts. Oh, good stuff. Good to hear it. Mr. Benji's hello, setting at work and managed to make the live stream. Good vibes. And I'm not going to try to pronounce your name. And then I go ahead and try to pronounce. Don't even try to pronounce my stupid name. That's hilarious. Just ordered an earmuff for us after seeing your videos. Stunning fish. Absolutely gorgeous. They get a little bit big for wrasses, but beautiful fish. And that's a very, very good choice indeed. When they show their best colours, they're beautiful. And even when they're just showing normal colours, yeah, cracking fish that. And mine was really peaceful as well. Really active, great choice. When I went out of town, I did a water change and a little feed and dipped. Not sure what you dipped, but even with water changes absolutely fine. Do them, but don't do an unusual water change. So I do a 10% water change every week without fail. I did a 10% water change, I think 2 days before I went away. And yeah, 2 or 3 days before I went away. And that's fine, but don't do a bigger one in anticipation if you're going to be away for 2 weeks or whatever. And don't worry about skipping a water change if you're away for 2 weeks or even a few weeks. Don't worry about missing water changes. It's far better to miss them than get someone else to do them in particular. I know that's not what you're asking in Old Fish Reef, but aquarium. I had good advice from other reefers, but what would you do about feeding fish that will not eat dry food, flake, or pellets? I feed them frozen. What would you do about? Tell me what fish they are, aquarium, because I'm interested. I feed all my fish frozen. It's all they eat. My fish up here in this tank get pellet food because it's a small tank and I've only got 3 fish in it, and it's much easier to control the amount of food you're adding with pellets than it is with frozen. But I would feed them frozen food, and I don't see any reason why not. Fish that will not eat dry food. I presume it's a fussy fish for whatever reason. Frozen is the answer. Some fishes don't eat pellets or flake or whatever. I find Some of my fish don't bother. Every now and then I'll chuck in food like this, or I'll find a new food with omega-3 or whatever, try that, and they're just not interested. You can train them if you keep on going and going and going, but if they won't do it, give them something else. And Fishbone Reef very nicely says, "Happy Mother's Day to all the mums." But Ian, tell me what fish you're talking about, and we'll go into that in a bit more. You've kept Malawi reefing journalists kept Malawi cichlids for a number of years, and the diet were mainly veg-based due to the species. Do you have the problem with bloat in marine fish, as you did in Mbuna species of Malawi if overfed? Never kept Malawi cichlids, so I don't know about that. But if you'd have to go some to overfeed your fish, your saltwater fish, to the point that they're unhealthily fat. I've seen some chunky old fish that are absolutely fine and very healthy. And if you're feeding so much that your fish are so fat that they're unhealthy, I'd be more worried about the nutrients in my tank and the phosphate and the nitrate being sky high. So I think you'd have to go some to feed your fish so much that they are unhealthy. Rudra investing in an ATO. Prior to that, I was manually adding daily water for the holiday and got an ATO, and game changer. Never having a reef tank without an ATO. Absolutely. I would never have it. But ATO is just massively important. And yeah, game changer, as you say. That's another thing that I wouldn't set up the day before or within a few days of going away on holiday, though. Anything, equipment like that's I don't know. I'm slightly torn on that, because if you're going away for a week, you probably you don't want to lose too much of your evaporation. I'd probably find a way around that. Maybe add, I don't know. I'd try to find a way around that, or just buy the ATO a week early, because they can go wrong. They can be funny to set up, all those sorts of things. But yeah, very much agree with ATO. Dawn Barrett says, do they have fish blocks for saltwater, or are they a bad idea? Do they have fish blocks for saltwater, or are these a bad idea? I don't know what fish blocks are. Fish blocks. Tell me what fish block is. What you mean? I don't know what that means. Is that a freshwater thing? Roger has also found train your fish with a feeding habit prior to the holiday, e.g. I only feed every 2 days, and I follow mysis flakes, and then 2 days later seaweed. Even my clownfish are eating seaweed. Good stuff. You might be talking to the guy who was trying to get his fish feeding. Ethan Ferrer. Yes, Ferrero Rocher without the O. I'm planning to be going out for a month, maybe 2. But by that time, because of some inconveniences, my fish would be in quarantine, and I'll be setting up a new tank and need to monitor. Any suggestions? All I would be worried about for that much time away is salinity. So getting an auto top off with a big enough reservoir to last that long, or probably better, preventing water from escaping in the first place. So put a polycarbonate lid on top or something to stop water evaporating, or you'd need a big old RO vat and an auto feeder. So these Eheim auto feeders, for example, there's an absolute ton of food in there. These basically take, well, an entire bottle's worth of pellet food. So that would easily last a couple of months, easily. So something like that would be fine. And I think that's probably the only thing I'd be worried about. I think you're talking about fish only in particular. So those are the main things. Here we go. You're talking about your fish. Fish would be an angel, a tang, 2 clowns, and antheas, and a goby. Okay, so antheas are a bit fussy. You want to feed them quite a lot. I'd want someone checking in, ideally someone who knows what they're doing, maybe once a week, just to see if everything's okay. Because if things went south, they could go south badly. But all I'd be really interested in, or the most important things, are food and top of water. Ionescu Gabriel, Tapo C200 is good cheap cam. Right, you can swivel it and tilt horizontally and vertically. You can check the tank and the sump just with one cam. That's good. So the one I had as well, this IP cam, Yi cam, I can't remember what it was. On the app, you can get it to go and like tilt around sideways and then up and down as well. But even then, I think it would be better to have one camera for the sump and one camera for the tank, because then you can have them more ideally located. But nonetheless, if you've got a camera like that, the Tapo Z200, that you can angle and direct, much better. Dawn Barrett, if the lights did stop working while away, how long would corals be okay without the light? I have 1 torch coral and 1 toadstool and 2 hammers. Probably quite a while. It's certainly a week or so would be fine because they'll still get a bit of natural light. And those corals in particular, my corals are all SPS corals, Aquapora, might not like it after a week or so. I don't know the answer, to be completely honest, but certainly more than a few days, I would be extremely twitchy. And the knock-on effect of corals not photosynthesizing very much and adding a load of dosing liquids would be a bigger problem for me. But that would, you'd probably be okay. The toadstool will be absolutely fine. Two hammers, probably all right as well. Have a look around, do a bit of Googling, because there'll be people who've experienced blackouts for days and days, and they'll be able to tell you how long they lasted. But I think you'd be surprised, certainly at least a few days, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a lot more than that. Rudra, a tip might also be to do the holiday routine before going on holiday, even the week prior. If you are used to doing daily things in your tank and then leave, it will be okay, like withdrawal syndrome. Fair enough, yeah. If you've got the time and the inclination to do that, I'm too lazy to do that sort of thing, but no bad thing. I had the same issue. The reagent tube was clogged. Yeah, so that's actually one thing. I don't know, 6 months ago, the little red outlet thing on the reagent, I chopped it, got clogged for whatever reason. It's got a really small outlet hole. This is the KH Keeper, Reef Factory KH Keeper, for those of you who don't know. And I I spoke to Reef Factory, and they said they were going to send me out a new one. But in the meantime, just I can't remember, said I'll just stick a pin in it. But instead of sticking a pin in it, I got a Stanley knife and just sliced a tiny bit off the end. So the hole is much bigger, and it hasn't clogged since then. I've done it on both my cage keepers. They haven't clogged, and I've not noticed any difference in accuracy. So it's absolutely fine. So I've had the same issue as you, Pierre. You don't want that and ruin your holiday. This way, you'll be more relaxed. It would just be a case of doing water change, clean, enjoy the holiday and routine. Be prepared and tested. The 6 P's, proper preparation and planning prevents poor performance. And we'll leave out the 7th P. Dawn, people, yeah, you're talking to someone else. It does get sunlight from the windows, but not much. I'm going for 2 weeks, to be honest. I'm nervous leaving it. So I have so much time put into it, not being away for 2 years. So I wouldn't stress too much about it, to be honest. Why do you think, why are you asking specifically about your lights going out? It's very unlikely that your lights are going to go out. I think in 7.5 years in the hobby, I'm yet to have lights turn off for any reason other than me turning them off. So why do you think that? I'm curious. Maybe there's a reason. Yeah, same problem. Yeah, we've just mentioned that. I would never link my doser to the KH Keeper. I would never link any doser to any KH testing advice. I have actually, with the KH Keeper, I've set the actions to limit it. So if the KH goes above 10 or whatever, skip the next dosing round. I've done that in the past, but even then, I don't do that now, and it's for this sort of thing. So something can easily pop off, and if it pops off and it's giving false readings, you don't want it adjusting your alkalinity or whatever. So yeah, I don't let I didn't let my cage director adjust my alk. I don't let my Reef Factory cage keeper adjust my alk. But some people do with success, but they're more trusting than me. How do you deal with diatom algae? Newbie over here. Leave it. Diatoms are basically the bottom of the food chain in a saltwater aquarium. Anything will eat it. Any cleanup crew, hermit crabs, snails, crabs, shrimp, maybe not shrimp, but pretty much anything will eat diatoms. Diatoms is at a perfectly natural stage and it will burn out, guaranteed. But if you're really bothered, get a conch. Conch is a cool way to eat diatoms, and get some hermit crabs. How do people feed their mandarin fish? Mine is frozen. That's cool. Chuck in as many copepods as you can do beforehand, ideally in your sump. If you've got a refugium, put them in there. You can get what are they called? Tiger copepod. If you get the copepods from your local fish shop, they're actually no good because they're not. Here we go. They're not the proper type of copepods, and I think they are the free swimming ones, and you want the benthic ones. These are the copepods you want. They're bloody expensive, mind. 100 milliliter sachet, 11 quid. A litre, 57 quid. But these are, let's have a look. Culture impact in the UK, but they're very good. And these actually, they stick to the, they're more likely to breed, basically. So bung in an absolute ton of them before you go away is my answer. But I've had, I don't know, half a dozen mandarins of various different types over the years, i.e. scooter burning mandarin, that sort of thing. And longest I've had one successfully, maybe 18 months, 2 years. They just don't do well long term in tanks, even in my established tank. but yeah, just stock up on frozen food, sort of frozen food copepods, but don't be scared, don't be worried, don't necessarily expect him to still be around, or don't be surprised if they die. I suspect a week is probably fine, but they're one of the fussy fish that will die at some point, more often than not. I'm going to skip that one, Seb, because that's a bit too controversial. You're talking to someone else. You're talking to someone else. What else have we got? Oh no, get rid of that. Not interested in that. The opinionated reefer. What about setting up an IP cam to watch the tank when you're away? Good or bad idea? Yeah. So this is, and these obviously I'm behind on the comments, but it's a good idea, but don't let it ruin your holiday, because you can just sit there checking in on it all the time. But it's a good idea if you've got it in conjunction with other things in particular. So if you've got an alkalinity tester and it tells you that your alkalinity is suddenly really high, you can check your IP cam and have a look and see if anything's okay. If everything's okay and if everything looks fine, don't sweat it. If everything looks like an absolute disaster and you can get back, then do get back. But ultimately, so this week when I was away, if I'd got 2 days into the holiday out of 5 and I saw all my fish floating at the top, the lights off, the flow pumps off, and just the tank was a cloudy mess with all the corals clearly dead and all the fish clearly dead, what can I do? Or if they were dying, what can I do? I could get the fish sitter to go in and have a look, but they're going to have very limited knowledge. So in theory, it's a good thing, but it's so easy to stress about it and look and just keep checking in on it all the time. So just try not to stress too much. Easier said than done. Do you do a water change before you go on holiday? Yes, but only if it's the usual water change. Don't do a bigger one. Don't change anything. Don't change your normal routine. Type aircraft. Should I run my AC while away or use fans to keep things cool? If your tank temperature is absolutely fine, then don't worry about it. If your tank temperature is getting hot in the weeks before you're going away, then use one of the two, which I think you're asking, should you use either or? Fans are surprisingly effective. Cooling fans are more effective than you would think. So I like cooling fans, but if you can put your AC on and you don't mind spending a bit of money on electricity, if you're in the UK, you won't want to do that because electricity is very expensive at the moment. But AC is certainly much more effective at cooling a tank because you're cooling the entire room than cooling fans. So if you can go for that, that's the better way to do it. What else have we got? I'm retired. John Wright is retired, so he spends most of my days watching a coral reef. So why go on holiday? Indeed. Well, go on holiday to a coral reef, a real life coral reef, Maldives or Fiji or wherever else. The Coral Triangle, Raja Ampat in Indonesia. Question: do you think LED lights lose their UV effectiveness as they age? Very few LED lights actually have UV. I think Kessel technically has some UV, maybe GHL Mitras, and I can't think of any others. There might be others, but not many do have UV. But yes, they lose everything, all power to some extent. I suspect it's not very much, maybe 5% a year, maybe not even that, to be fair. It's like cars lose horsepower over the years, don't they? But if you buy a 10-year-old car that started with, a fast car that started with 300 horsepower, still bloody quick. So, yeah, they do, I'm sure. But I personally don't worry about that too much. Certainly less than 5 years old, I've got no problem with that. 10 years old, I might be a little bit worried about buying a set of LEDs that old, but less than 5 years, I wouldn't sweat it too much. And ideally around 2 or 3 years or even younger, you can still get some really good deals on lights that are secondhand. How long have you left a tank unsupervised, no visits? Jay's Real Reef, fellow UK YouTuber. How long have I left a tank? At least a week. And I think 10 days. I went to Thailand on a diving trip and left it for 10 days. I got back and a yellow long-nosed butterfly had died for no apparent reason. But everything else was absolutely fine. And yellow long-noses are a little bit finicky, or can be a little bit finicky as well. So that's not necessarily a surprise. So I think a week is the longest I've left my tank unsupervised. To be completely honest, I don't like the idea of going away on holiday for a fortnight, partly because I don't want to leave my tank for that long. There are times when you're just sitting around at home and suddenly you can find a problem with the tank and you fix it, it's fine. But if you weren't there and you couldn't fix it, it's a major problem. So that stresses me out a little bit. I try not to worry about it, and the best advice is not to worry about it. But I think 10 days is the most I would like to do. I like being at home anyway. I love going away, but I like being at home for various other reasons as well. But a week is probably the most I've left it. Maybe 10 days if that was my Thailand trip. You're asking Dawn about time lights as well. Yeah. That's a good point. She might have been talking about, we'll come back on that. She might have been talking about lights that are either on or off. So you don't have the control or whatever. Let's catch up with everybody else. There was much more before. Can only watch so much. Oh, sorry, I've missed a load of your questions in that case. Yeah, that's why it didn't make sense. Medicine pill box. That's a really good idea. Already labelled Monday to Sunday. Yeah, really good idea. They're already labelled. For food, of course. Hurren's Reef. Picked up my reef mat this weekend. So no more filter stocks and one less thing to worry about when away. Yeah, so good. Water clarity. My water clarity is still, I don't know, 5-6 weeks in. Absolutely amazing. I've been looking at ozone recently to get the perfect water clarity. And I wasn't expecting the reef mat to make my water clarity better, but it has much, much better, to the point that now when I change my activated carbon, normally in the past when I change my activated carbon, within an hour, the tank looks much, much better, noticeably different. I changed my activated carbon the other day for the first time since installing the reef mat. Water looked no different. It looked exactly the same. It's so good. I don't know. Don't take my word for that, because it's just me. See what other people have said, and I'll report back in 6 months if it's still the same. But if it is still the same in 6 months, then it's fantastic. What's your take on All for Reef? Khalifa Al Mazuri. So nothing wrong with it. It's very easy. You only need one dosing pump, whereas with a lot of dosing solutions, you need 2 or 3. It's a little bit expensive, but for a small tank, it's absolutely fine. The only thing is BRS recently said that, or I don't know, 6 months ago, revealed that it doesn't increase your pH, whereas other things like Triton method and ATI Essentials Plus, for example, and the Red Sea, one of the Red Sea, the bottled one or the powdered one, I think the bottled one, they do increase your pH. And actually, because of all the talk about pH, I was going to say lately, but for years we know pH is important. I wouldn't use All for Reef now, knowing that it doesn't increase my pH, unless your pH is absolutely fine, in which case, crack on. Just finished my scape on my 220 gallon. Although I would say actually that's probably overthinking it and trying to get perfection. So if you just don't worry too much about it, and yeah, it's good. It's a better answer. Les Smith, I've just finished my scape, 220 gallon night tank. Hopefully getting it wet next weekend. Great videos, good content, keep them coming. Great. I thought you had a question. Reef mat scale of 1 to 10 being best. What do you really think? 10. It is just, it's the best piece of equipment. My review was a bit of a gushing review. And I said this on last week's live stream. I know I thought about at the end saying, yeah, look, I know I'm going over the top here, but trust me, it's really good. But I figured that there are people who are just not going to take my word for it. That's fine. You don't have to listen to me. You don't have to be persuaded by me. I'm not making these videos to sell you stuff. I'm not on commission. I don't care if Red Sea sell me more stuff in the future. Genuinely, it is fantastic. It's the best piece of equipment I've added, single best piece of equipment I've added to my tank since a KH keeper that measures alkalinity automatically. And actually, that just saves me a job of testing manually. This makes a visual difference. Adding my Kessels a couple of weeks ago, my new lighting setup that was extremely expensive, is the only other thing that's had a significant visual impact on my tank as the reef mat. And I was using an X filter roller before that, so I didn't expect an increase in clarity. It is absolutely fantastic, in my opinion, in my experience with only one of them. But to the point that on my 2-foot nano tank, they're quite big. On my 2-foot nano tank, I've been looking into a way of how I could modify the sump to fit one in there. At the moment, it won't fit in, but I've been working out ways that I can modify the sump in order to pull my clarity out and put a reef mat in. Because if it does that with water clarity, and that's not just a one-off with my tank, if it does that with water clarity, I would never be without one. It's just so good. So as far as I can tell so far, I've only had it 2 months, well, less than 2 months, but it's absolutely brilliant. Honest, hand on heart opinion. That the review I did is not an exaggeration. I'm not lying. I'm not doing it. Some people suggested, which of course you're right to be cynical. Some people suggested I'm doing it because I want to be nice to Red Sea and because I want more products from them in the future. I really don't care about that side of things, but I understand why people think that, and I would think that myself of other people, so that's fine. Don't have to listen to me, but honestly, it's fantastic, and I'm very, very impressed indeed. Enough of the sales pitch anyway. Fish all eat flake apart from cardinals. It's the cardinals can't put frozen in auto feeder. Oh, I see. Sorry, you're talking about, of course, the theme of going away. I'm surprised your cardinals don't eat pellets or flake. What would you do? I just wouldn't feed them for a week. If it's a week or so, I wouldn't feed them. Wouldn't worry about it too much. You could put a load of, again, these kind of copepods, bang a load of them into your sump. It's not the most effective way because I don't know what I don't know if Bengal cardinals go hunting for copepods. They don't seem the type to do so. They swim in the mid-water, don't they? Really. Difficult call, to be honest. I think I would try a few different pellets to see if you can get them hooked on something. But there aren't really many other options as far as I'm concerned. But there you go. I keep seahorses that need to eat 3 to 4 times a day. The thought of going away, even for a long weekend, is worry. And this is the thing. It's a stress, and it can end up ruining your holiday. But yeah, I mean, that's the drawback. If you've got pets that require that much maintenance and that much care, you've got to look after them. And so you're right to be worried about them, to be fair. But yeah, difficult. Heron's Reef. I presume you're talking to Michael Eddy about the reef map. I purchased silicone ice cube molds, 1 centimetre square. I mix all my food, frozen pellets, and Benny Pets. Oh, Benny Pets, interesting. And I add a drop of coral amino acid on each cube and freeze. That sounds like a really good little recipe, actually. I like that. It's too much effort for me because I'm lazy, as we all know, but I like that. If I could be bothered, I'd do that sort of thing. They're blocks of food for fresh water. Yeah, I can't remember what you were talking about, but you did mention this earlier. You drop it in and they dissolve, releasing God knows what into the water and release food. I'd say a lot of people rinse out frozen food, for example, before they put them in the tank. I don't ever bother. I just chuck it all in. So I don't know. They were fish blocks, wasn't it? Yeah. So I would never use anything for fresh water, but the equivalent is frozen food, I guess, for salt water, and I've got no problem whacking that all in. I went through, I don't know, a year or so into the hobby. I was obsessing about whether you should be rinsing the frozen food, whether it's good to put it all in. I've read all these articles that were like semi-scientific articles explaining the pros and cons and all of this, and I've ended up deciding it doesn't make a difference. Just whack it all in, and it's much easier. Hi, says Linda Gould. What is your take on nitrate FX? As I like to have quite a few fish, although it's 260 gallon, I struggle to get nitrates below 20. Nitrate FX, I presume that's a liquid that you dose to reduce nitrate, but I've not heard of nitrate FX. So I'm going to Google it. Blue Life Nitrate FX. Regenerable multiple times. Cost-effective means of reduce and extended maintenance interval. Prevents algae growth. Safe and effective way to lower nitrates. I don't like the sound of that, to be completely honest. Anion. No, I don't like that. I don't know what it is, which is the main reason I don't like it. And it sounds like it's regenerable multiple times, making it a cost-effective means for reducing nitrates. I mean, there are so many ways of reducing nitrates. Nitrates shouldn't be too difficult to reduce. And I never heard of Nitrate FX, but I wouldn't use that sort of product. But I don't know because I don't know what it is. So I can't give you any better advice than that, to be honest. I would prefer to have a bigger refugium. Refugiums are very effective in nitrates. A skimmer, maybe feed a bit less. What else? Filter roller. Any filter roller will reduce nitrates. Those sorts of things is what I would use. Or carbon dosing. I don't know if Nitrate FX is carbon dosing, but carbon dosing can reduce nitrates. You've just got to watch it quite carefully. because it will rip out your nitrates very much if you're not careful. Billy Sherwood, the Aquatic Design Centre is an aquatic store with a marine and freshwater section. It's corals and fish, and are about to get 5 tricolour tanks if you fancy seeing them. Okay, interesting. I'll see if I can remember to check it out. Fish shops in London, I would guess, are extraordinarily expensive, but I'm always up for checking out new shops, so I'll check it out. Woodrow is talking to you. Dawn. Canadian Reef just plumbed his RADI into my ATO container with a float valve and a solenoid that only come on for an hour every day. Cool. That sounds like a nice setup. People do blackouts for algae control. I'm not a fan of doing blackouts for algae control at all. That's a band-aid, as the Americans would say for me. But some people do blackouts for algae control. Just had a huge outdrop after not realizing the CO2 on my calc reactor had run out. Lots of STN on the SPS as a result. Gutted for you. That sounds nasty. Must have been a swift outdrop in that case, because outdropping slowly doesn't normally cause any problems, but I guess that was a fairly sudden drop, so my sympathies for you. For YouTube chilling, I'm so happy to announce that I'm almost done setting up a brand new tank. It's a 125, so it's a nice size. Upgrading from 75, going 4 feet to 6 feet. Very nice. I'm getting a skimmer in a week and a half. Nice tank. Good work. You're talking to someone else. Recognize finally found a Nauko wrasse. After I always pronounce that Naoko. Someone told me it's Nauko, which is probably right, but whatever. After almost a year of searching, any tips for him? Chuck him in your tank, feed him. Mine was really easy to look after. He got bullied to death in the end by, I can't remember, maybe my purple tang, maybe my coal tang, I think. He got bullied to death in the end, but before that, he was absolutely fine. So don't keep him with aggressive fish, because they're quite flashy and they're always showing. Some fish don't like that, and they see it as like an attack on their manhood or whatever. But really easy fish to keep. I just put some food in every now and then. Didn't make any changes for him, and he cracked on, so he was great. Are holiday feeders useful? See earlier comments regarding the Eheim single feeder. Yeah, they're very useful, and I like them. And Robert Graham is an hour late, which is unacceptable, Robert. Set yourself a timer. Who can afford a holiday when you have a reef tank? Very good point indeed, especially with electricity bills going up. Need help convincing my girlfriend to let me upgrade my tank. It is easier to get forgiveness than permission, is all I would say. Precise Signs. What do you think of buying some lead strips from Amazon and making your own aquarium light? Do you think it's as good as ready-made lights? No, it won't be as good as ready-made lights, almost certainly. I wouldn't ever do that, because I don't know what I'm doing with that sort of thing. If you know what you're doing and you know about LEDs, you know about spectrum, you know what to look for, you know how to put them together, you know about cooling, all that sort of stuff, then fine, do it. If you don't know what you're doing and you just fancy a project, I wouldn't do it myself personally at all. Check out Telegram, though. That seems like the sort of thing he would do. And I'm trying to think if he's made DIY lights that way. He might have done. But I don't like the sound of that, to be honest. And would they be as good as ready-made lights? Almost certainly no, unless you're a genius. There's a lot of R&D goes into most of those lights. And thank you very much, Woodrow, for the congratulations. All for Reef worked good in my 20-gallon. There you go. Chris Lancashire Reef installed my reef mat yesterday. Water is crystal clear and it's pulling out even more than the filter floss has ever done. Very good news. And tell me, everybody else, if you've got a reef mat, let me know if it works or if it doesn't work. Interested to know other people's experiences. Shell Smuck asks what my favourite fish is. My favourite fish in my tank, probably the copper-banded butterfly, yeah. Easy. What is the tank litre to live rock in kilogram ratio that you should have? I don't subscribe to if you look up these ratios that say you should have X pounds or X kilos of rock for X gallons, you get a lot of it is outdated. So you would have basically 90% rock and 10% water. So I don't ever follow that theory. I try to get in as much as I can without it being overcrowded, basically. So more is better, but I don't ever stress about it. I think I've got less than 25 kilos in my 100-gallon, roughly 100-gallon tank. So what's that in litres? 400 litres. So whatever that ratio is, and that's not a lot. It's not a negative space aquascape, but it's not a lot of rock, and it's absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. So I wouldn't be worried too much. I would just make a skate that you like the look of. It has plenty of hiding spaces for fish, has nice angles for corals to put on. You don't want any uprights unless they're out of the way where you're not going to mount corals. You want nice sloping edges to mount corals. You want different, so with the gaps and the caves for fish and swimming space, and overhangs, that sort of thing, you want various different sizes. So then if you've got a small fish, they can go in and hide from the big fish. If you've got a big fish for them, they can have a better space for them to hide, all that sort of thing. So that is the most important thing for me, is 4 things maybe. Is space for fish to hide, probably the most important. Angles for corals to be placed on. What was I going to say? What was the other one? So flow. You don't want it all to be blocking your flow. So try to think about how your skate might block flow, but that's quite difficult. And I think that's it. There was something else I was going to say, but I can't remember. UK Reef Boat. If you already had a Clarity Gen 3, would you get rid of and buy your reef mat? I have a Clarity Gen 2 on my tank up here, and I am trying to work out a way to fit it in. If I can, I'll do it. But I mean, the thing is, so I would do it because the clarity in my water is just unbelievable now. But if it weren't for that, and if let's say you see another 100 people put out reviews or talk about it, and it doesn't make a difference to their clarity, I wouldn't get it. The features are good and worth it. And if you're buying brand new, then it's the best reef auto roller on the market, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't think it would be so worthwhile that it would be worthwhile upgrading to. And the features are only kind of nice to have, rather than absolutely must have. But if it makes your water as clear as mine does, then by all means. But wait to see what other people say. You don't want one report, you want 100 reports, is what I would say. And Andy, when you first set up your clarity, you couldn't believe how clear the water was. So I got that to an extent with my X filter and to an extent with my clarity up here. But just it was unbelievable how different it was with the reef mat. I didn't notice it massively with the other two. With this, the difference is huge. And I've had an X filter in place for 3 years already. So I wasn't expecting that. Anyway. Does your skimmer work less now with the reef mat? No, it's exactly the same. It's unchanged. No difference. In fact, they told me that I didn't mention this in the video, but they told me that the material is made of. I can't remember what they said about it, but they said it doesn't interfere with your skimmer. And I didn't mention it because I'd never had a fleece roller interfere with my skimmer. So, but no, it shouldn't do. I set up my Reef Mat 500 today in my Waterworks 130. It was fiddly cutting out the glass, but what a bit of kit. Excellent. Good to hear. I didn't use the glass cutting kit. It looks really good, but I got no baffles to remove. But I used scalpels to do it last time, and it was a pain. Definitely going to be buying packs of copepods. Yes, I breed seahorses and constantly hatching brine can be a pain. Okay, yeah. Those tiger copepods. If you Google tiger copepods, it'll take you to reefphyto.co.uk, and those are the ones to go for. Those are the ones you want. They're bloody expensive, but they are better than the copepods you get in shops. Aquasian mix small pellets with frozen as this. That's a good idea actually. Yeah, very good idea indeed. In fact, so for the benefit of anyone else, you're talking about mixing the pellets in with the frozen food to get the Bengal cardinals to eat them. The theory is they'll chomp down all the frozen food, and then in that frozen food they'll have pellets, and they'll be like, oh, do you know what? Those pellets are actually quite nice. Take away the frozen food a week later, and they're like, oh, pellets. Yeah, I remember them, and they're nice. But yeah, very good suggestion, Paul. John Wright, would it be a good idea to treat your tank for a week before you go away as if you're on holiday? In what way? Feeding less? No, absolutely not. I don't know. So Rudra suggested that early, and maybe it's a good idea to get into the swing of things. I wouldn't do anything different. I wouldn't stress it too much. I just wouldn't make any changes a week before you go on holiday, personally. Can you recommend any other cost-effective feeds for raising fry? I never raised fry, so I'm afraid I can't help you. Is the Nora seaweed, nori I think you mean, good for all marine or just certain ones? and how often do you use it. So I don't feed nori very often at all because it's a pain in the backside to add it. It's certainly good for tangs and algae eaters like fox faces, but I do find that my other fish eat it as well. So wrasses eat it. What else eats it? Clownfish eat it. There'll be plenty of fish that will eat nori as well, but tangs are the ones that will go crazy for it. My copper band will have a bit of a crack at it. And Aquarian says thanks to Paul for the tip. Hope that's a fine scotch there. So I get this every week is beer, unfortunately. I'm a chav. So do you feed shop or pet store seaweed? I buy from pet fish, from my fish shop. No good reason, no better reason. I suspect there's a lot of reef tax on LFS bought seaweed, but I do. There's nothing wrong with buying it from a normal shop, your local supermarket. So yeah, but I don't. I like the fact that it comes in easy to feed strips and all that sort of stuff. And sometimes they soak it in omega-3 and all that sort of thing as well. Better all just don't keep a purple tang. Amen. What else have we got going on? I'm considering going double pump like you have. Good idea. I saw you didn't use check valves. I do use check valves now. Was there a specific reason? I'm contemplating them, but have space issues. Yeah, so check valves are massive. And in fact, let me show you one. No, I've moved them. So the check valves, I do have check valves now. When I first installed them, I didn't use check valves because I didn't think about it. And then as soon as I turned them on, I was like, or as soon as I can't remember someone. However I found out about it, I realised that if you don't have check valves on a twin return pump setup, you might as well not bother having twin return pumps, because the water, if one of your return pumps dies, the water will just go through the dead pump rather than going up because there's no pressure, so it won't go up to your main tank. So yes, I now do have check valves on. I have return pumps, twin return pumps on both of my tanks, and they both have check valves. You can get smaller, what they call just standard check valves. I don't like the ones I have. They rattle a little bit, although they've gone quite over time, but it took a good few months. The other ones, the flapper style valves, check valves, are brilliant. They're see-through, so you can see if there's dirt building up. They're double union, so you can take them apart really easily. I got them from Cotswold Koi in the UK. They're quite expensive, but they're very good, and they're big, but they're brilliant. James just got into reef keeping, and I'm looking at upgrading the lights that came with my tank. Any good brands I can look at? What tank have you got? As in, how big is it? What corals are you looking to keep? LPS, SPS, or soft corals? And what is your budget? Tell me those things, and I will answer your question. Picking up my 1200 for my 750. Oh, your reef mat, yeah, excellent this week. Excellent. It's only frozen food I rinse PE mysis because it's so oily. Yeah, PE mysis is oily as hell. What's the name of the person I must check about? Telegram. TELEGRAHAM. Telegram, as we would say in the UK. He's on Instagram at Telegram, and he's on YouTube Telegram. He does live streams every Saturday, or every weekend, I think, basically. And he is a budgeteer reefer, really good, completely straight down the line, and we'll level with you, and we'll give you some good advice. And I wouldn't be surprised if you ping him a message on Instagram if he gets back to you. Sorry, Jim, if I'm giving you a burden. You're telling me about lights. Okay, so do tell me what your budget is, how big your tank is, what corals you want, James, because I'm interested in those. What else have we got? John writes, sorry, I meant to do a test. Do a test week some weeks before you go away. I still don't really see what benefit you're getting from that. So no, I wouldn't bother, because a test week, yeah, maybe, I suppose so, because then you might find that your ATO runs dry quicker. There's no harm in doing it, to be fair. Yeah, no harm in doing it. Have a crack. I don't think I would do it, but no harm in doing it. Yeah. And you're recommending seaweed extreme algae pellets instead of nori, perhaps? Whatever. Can't remember. You might be talking to someone else. Do you feed? Yep, I've answered that already. And you feed sushi from Asda. There you go, which is probably a better way to do it. I just don't mind paying reef tax sometimes. Oh, and you also asked how often I feed it. Very, very rarely. If I could be bothered, I'd feed it a couple of times a week. But again, I'm too lazy. It's what it's always going to come down to. Lots more. They do seaweed pellets. So actually, I bought some nori pellets. Are they nori pellets? I think I bought some nori pellets recently, but I've not started using them as yet. Off topic. Have you ever bumped into MD from MD Fish Tanks at Maidenhead Aquatics? No. What's MD Fish Tanks? That's a YouTube channel, presumably. No, I haven't. I don't know where is that. If he's in the Surrey area, maybe, or Hampshire, maybe, but otherwise probably not. Fish Palace. I need a tank for a week. I feed tank for a week before going on holiday to make sure the auto feed is feeding correct amount. Yep, good advice. I also need to set up an ATU on a Red Sea tank as that uses gravity fed. Yeah, yeah, I hate them. I hate the ATU on the Red Seas. And 4 days, yeah, is about what mine did. Yeah, good point. Woodrow, I've been using seafood nutrition seaweed, and to be honest, it has lasted me like 6 months. Came with nori clip too, so no complaints. That's the other thing. The expensive local fish shop bought nori lasts bloody ages. So it's I don't mind paying reef tax on that sort of thing. Jo, but then if you can get it from Asda for a third the price, why not? Why not? I'd like to upgrade the lights on my 3-foot, but I run a black cover to stop light spill to keep the the other half happy. So a pendant fitting is out. I've looked at another Fluval Marine 3.0, I suppose, on a black cover to stop the light spill. Okay, so you've got a hood. Yeah, okay, so you're limited in options. I mean, 3-foot tank. I was going to say the Tunzi 88, Tunzi Marine Eco Chic, whatever they are, but they're not very powerful at all. So you need a lot of them. 4 probably, maybe even more. You don't have many options. But if I've never had a cover like that, and when I did, so I have. When I did, I had it for like a week just to make a video, and I used the Tunzies. But on a 3-foot tank, I don't know if I'd go for the Tunzies. I've got a 15-gallon for soft corals, budget around $100 for a basic coral light. I would 15-gallon, very small tank, isn't it? Something I would go secondhand personally for that. I don't like the cheaper brands that you get off Amazon, AliExpress, those sorts of things. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. I just don't like them. But I would go for a secondhand AI Prime HD. I reckon you could get for around $100, or that's a pretty small tank. Maybe even a secondhand Kettle A80, ideally an A160. But that's what I would go for that kind of budget. Where do you guys get the cover for lights? Mine is RS90 LES. The cover light, you can get 3D printed light shields that stop the light spill from coming out. I think that's what you mean, but various 3D printed places. Have you used the new RFGs? No, I don't like RFGs. Funny thing happened to me when I shut off my return pump and my check valve flutters, allows more water through. It started when I saw the RFG. Okay, no, I don't like RFGs because they stick out into your tank quite a long way, which shades some of my corals. And on a big tank like mine, 100 odd gallons, doesn't really make a difference. I've got 4 MP40s with flow. It doesn't diffuse the return pump so much that my sand bed doesn't get blown around. If I had a really small tank, maybe that size, for example, or smaller, or big, or slightly bigger, I'd probably consider a random flow generator. But I don't. For most tanks, they're not really worth bothering with. I think I'd want 60 litres or less to bother with a random flow generator, but others might think differently. Thoughts on low phosphate with higher par? Rillet pale corals for sure. I have a hard time keeping phosphate in my mixed reef. Yeah, supposedly if you run higher par, it's a better idea to have higher phosphate. But what do you mean by low phosphate? And if you've got a mixed reef, then you don't want highlight anyway, because I'm assuming you're not going with aquapore. Maybe you're going with aquapore, I don't know. But you don't want massively highlight anyway for a mixed reef, I would say. From your legal background, what are your thoughts on the Johnny Depp trial? So I have no knowledge of any of that kind of law whatsoever, but I'm finding it very funny. And I used to think before all this came out that Johnny Depp was a piece of work and was a wife beater. And I don't know. Who knows what's really going to happen? No one's going to find out the truth. But Amber Heard has not come across well at all in this. And I think if he is a piece of work, maybe she's a piece of work too. So no one wins. But I don't know. Thanks for asking all the questions. You are welcome. Right, here we go. 150 litre soft coral tank right now, but open to suggestions. Budget is less than 500, but willing to spend if it lasts across tank upgrades. All right, so it sounds like a really good idea, doesn't it, to buy a light thinking, or any piece of equipment thinking, you know what, this will last me when I upgrade. I find actually in reality, normally if you upgrade, you just replace everything and you don't end up just adding more of the same lights, for example, or reusing a skimmer. So I wouldn't have that as a massively high priority, but I get it. 150 litres is basically the size of this tank here. So I have on this a Reef Factory Reef Flare Pro S, which is very good for 350 quid, another 80 quid-ish for the bracket. Before that, I had a Red Sea Reef Lead 90. The Reef Factory I was given, the Reef Lead I bought. The Reef Lead was fine, nothing really wrong with it. Very good for a tank of 150 litres. Radion XR15 would be excellent as well. Kessel A360X. Oh, the shimmer on them, man. It's something else. And the colour. But just don't give you very deep blues. Various different types, various options. Look at all the BRS reviews. They tell you, because there's no, in my opinion, there's no best light. They all do things slightly differently. And if you're only looking at soft coral, you really, 500 quid's a healthy budget. And you don't need to be spending that kind of money. To be fair, you could probably get away with something smaller. But yeah, if you're thinking about upgrading, I would get something modular that you could use for a bigger tank if you really want to do that, like a Radion XR15, a Reef Factory Reef Flare Pro S, a Reef Lead 90, the AI Hydra 32, the Kessel A360, something like that. The Kessel would be my choice, to be honest, because it will make your tank look better than any other light. But they're bloody expensive in the UK, and you'll spend every pound of that 500 quid getting them. They might even work out a little bit more expensive by the time you've bought the Wi-Fi dongle and the mounting arm. The mounting arm is the best. The Kessel mounting arm is the best of the bunch, in my opinion. It looks really sleek, hides the cables really well. It's better than any other mounting arm. But God, it's personal preference, really. Go and see as many as you can in shops and see which ones you like the look of. Radions are everywhere. Nothing wrong with them, so maybe you end up with a Radion. No empty fish tanks, as in Southwest. Oh, right, near Taunton. And he's a freshwater planted guy. No, okay. No, I haven't. So I have family in Taunton, but I very rarely go there, to be honest. So no, I haven't. The duo pump solution would be to merge my regular return pump and my UV filter return. Do you reckon the difference would be an issue? I think you're saying that you're going to be you would be running your UV sterilizer off the same pump that you use as your main return pump for the tank, right? I wouldn't do that personally. Even if you have a ball valve or a gate valve or whatever, it's very difficult to dial it in for the right flow. And if the flow for your main return pump changes, then it has a knock-on effect on the UV sterilizer. And UV sterilizers, you want to have good control over their flow rate. So I would have the UV sterilizer on a separate return pump, or a dedicated pump, basically. And would we use a single AI prime on a 170, no problems. And I've got torches there as ACANs, and the ACANs love it. Yeah, so there you go. An AI prime probably wouldn't be underkill, to be fair. If you've got the budget to go for something better, then do. But there you go. AI prime is a hugely popular light, and loads of people have had success with them. So, and they're modular as well. Wow, in theory. But I've not seen many people with several of them. But yeah, that's probably not a bad shout. And like I said, you don't need to spend 500 quid for that. If you want to spend 500, the other lights are better. but they're not going to be better for your corals. The something like the AI Prime, especially for softies, will be as good as anything else. Oh, you're talking to someone else. Does Reef Talk have a holiday horror story, Reef Tank related? I had I came back and had a yellow long-nosed butterfly dead. That's about as bad as it's ever got. So no, not really. I've been on holiday. I don't like going holiday for long, but I've never had a major headache. I've never had a major problem. Can't even think if I've ever come back to dead corals before, to be honest. Apart from this one on the cover, of course. I don't think so. No, I've never had any major problems, and that's it. Everything's probably going to be fine. It really is. But we stress about it, don't we? I'll never feed seaweed via a clip anymore as it blocked my downpipe and nearly overflowed. Oh, God, that would be a disaster. Low phosphate equals either 0.01 or undetectable. Okay, that's pretty low, to be fair. But I wouldn't have high, depending on what corals you've got, and let's see if you've talked about aquaporin or whatever. I wouldn't be too worried about having strong light on those anyway. I've got an aquaporin dominated tank, and the last time I did reliable PAR tests, I was getting a peak of 350-ish across the tank, which isn't especially strong light. So anything there or lower would be absolutely fine. You only really want to be playing around with higher light if you've got particular corals that... Oh, in fact, Aquarian, I've just seen you've commented on my my post from Instagram today. Anyway, if you've got basically the basics are what you need to get sorted with all your corals. I wouldn't worry about cranking up the lighting far too high or trying to get really strong PAR until you've sorted everything else out, and you're down the rabbit hole of trying to tweak the last few things. Some corals like tenuous do like a stronger light. So if you want to do that sort of thing, then fine. But as a general rule, I wouldn't worry too much about cranking up the light. It's not going to, if you go for 600 PAR instead of 300 PAR, you're not necessarily going to have, or you're probably not going to have more healthy corals. And if you've got everything, if you've got the basics sorted and nailed down, your corals will look fantastic, regardless of whether your PAR is 300 or higher. Martin Salmond, I've got a 3 foot by 2 foot tank, nice size that is. Want to keep LPS like torches, gullies, etc. 2 Hydra 62 second hand. Will they be good enough for LPS? Yes, simple as that. Oh, absolutely they will. Yeah, fine. And so I did a lighting live stream last weekend. Lighting is not, I was about to say, it's not as important as people make out. It is as important as people make out, but it's not worth spending mega bucks on. And you're not going to see significant differences if you spend a fortune on lights against buying 2 secondhand hydras, which are perfectly good. So yeah, for those corals in particular, you don't want strong light. So yeah, 2 Hydra 26 HDs gives you nice spread, not too much power. Perfect. I think that's a really good combination. And actually, so my local fish shop has Hydra HDs over, I think they might even be the 26s, over most of their tanks, and they look really nice. They give a really nice clean white look with some nice crisp color, and the blues are really nice and deep as well. So good light. I would go for that. I like 3 foot by 2 foot size tanks as well. Really good size. If I could do it again, I would do Kessels with T5s. Oh yes, I love Kessels with T5s. I'm a little disappointed this combination wasn't more recommended by reefers. I don't get why Kessels aren't more popular in the UK, except for just going back to Woodward's comment on the 3 foot by 2 foot. Yeah, so they're not more popular in the UK. They're bloody expensive, and that must be the reason. And I don't know why they're so expensive, because Radions are roughly the same price in the States and yet much cheaper over here. So I don't know why they're so expensive. And in theory, it's a good thing that they don't come with a built-in Wi-Fi chip or built-in Bluetooth, because that means that, especially Wi-Fi, that means you don't have another, if you were to buy 5, then you don't have another 5 Wi-Fi chips in your house, which is a bad thing in theory, and it saves money because then you're not paying for one when you don't need it, and you only buy one if you need it. But in all honesty, we want control built in, and we don't want to have to spend another 130 quid my Wi-Fi dongle cost me. It's crazy money. So they are expensive. So that's probably why. But the Kessels with T5 I've had 3 times now, and just can't beat them. They're just so good. Low light, yes. And you've answered that. Great. Joey of King of DIY has just done a planted marine tank. No corals in sea off tank. Yeah, with seaweed and algae, and thinks planted might be a new thing in marine. I don't like it personally. I find it very boring. I think it's they're just algae. It's like red grass. Is it Grassolaris algae? Yeah, I've seen a few of them. Matthew from My First Fish Tank has one that looks quite nice, to be fair. But to me, they're then they're never going to be the new thing in marine tanks, as far as I'm concerned, because you can keep algae in any tank. So why go for all the bother of having a saltwater tank if you're not going to keep corals? Corals are just the best thing possible. Those corals are amazing. So no, I mean some people might like it. Personally, I find that a little bit boring. But if you had seahorses, then yeah, because they're good companions for seahorses. To be fair. Not sure if you're talking to me or what companies I was talking about. I can't remember. I think you might be talking to Rudra. What is your response to what Joe said about your channel? Joe. Who's Joe? What did Joe say? Is this a comment here or is someone else? I don't know who Joe is and I don't know what he said about my channel. So I have no response. What exactly do you do for a living? I'm an ombudsman. What, for instance, Ecotech, yep, you're carrying on that conversation. Do I go for blues over whites for growth? Don't sweat it too much. So I don't think that that you're going to see a significant difference between blues and whites in terms of growth. So I wouldn't fuss too much. Just set it up the way you like it. You want blues, you want a bit of white as well. Set it up the way you like the look. If that means you've got it quite heavy blues, have it heavy blues. If it means you've got it heavy whites, have it heavy whites. Your corals are going to be absolutely fine. They'll adapt to the spectrum. Personally, I tend to have, if I've got color sliders, I ramp up all the blues, purples, violets to 100%. I sometimes have red and green on very low levels, but sometimes have them off. And I then play around with the white until I get to the point where my tank looks nice to me. So it's the nice white look during the day. So you can see what your corals look like. You can see your fish really brightly. And that tends to be around 35% white to my eye. But this is what I like the look of. So that's what I would go for. And I wouldn't sweat too much about marginal gains because if you've got everything else sorted, it won't matter. It won't make an ounce of difference if your lights are a bit too blue or a bit too white. So nail the basics: nutrients, flow, and basic light, good spread, all that sort of stuff. I just bought a second-hand tank with a lot of salt creep. What's the best way to clean it? Yeah, salt creep is a bit of a pain in the backside. So I get salt creep on my lid. I just run my finger across it like that, and it drops in and sort of dissolves into the tank. If it's the really hard stuff, I use a blade, like a what's it called, a Stanley blade sometimes. But you've got to be careful with them because sometimes the little packets they come in have oil on them. So if you also actually no, I also use a little JBL algae scraper and just scrape it off. But yeah, that's probably the best way. You're talking to Rudra. I have green hair algae, phosphate 0.05, nitrate 1. Pretty good. Lights on low, urchin not eating it. Oh, you bastard urchin. Any ideas with a refugium and Cheeto? You could try a refugium to see if it outcompetes it. You've probably got, your hair algae is probably munching through quite a lot of nitrate and phosphate, so maybe back off. So you're getting a false reading because that's your excess nitrate and phosphate. And so what that means is you're pumping in a load of nitrate and phosphate. Most of it is being taken up by the algae, and there's a little bit left over. So if the algae wasn't there, your readings would be much higher, which is a better measure of the true position. I would pull out as much as you can. Maybe, I don't know how big the tank is. If you can get a tang or a rabbit fish, do so. And back off the feeding for a bit. See if that changes things. Tell us the plans for your mini tank, please. You'll find out on Friday. I've posted a couple of bits on Instagram about it, so check them out there, but you'll find out on Friday. I'm going to try to do the video for that this week because I'm really excited about it. Steve Webb has got Kessels on my planted tank. Wouldn't have anything else. Spectral controller is good, but just bought an AI Prime for my first Reef but it is only, oh, right, sorry, only 90 litres. Yeah, cool. Nothing wrong with that light at all. You're talking to each other, and we're getting to the end. Here we go. John Wright. So we're wrapping up now. I'll wrap up in a sec. If you've got any more questions, chuck them in. I've got a few more questions to get to, then we'll call it a night. Such a tank tease, I know, Tom. Reef talk, and I do realise the algae might be reducing my nitrates, which you've already said. That's actually one thing. As you pull out all your algae, your nitrates will go up, and it's worth testing. But yeah, manual removal is if you've got a pest in your tank that you can manually remove, that is the place to start. Purple tang and a fox face. Oh, they're not eating it. Yeah, they don't always. Maybe stop feeding them. If they're quite young, they don't always eat the types of algae that they do later in life. My fox face wasn't as good as he is now. But yeah, manual removal and remove and feed. I'd back off feeding for a bit. Yeah, for sure. Just bought a Reef 300 XL. Love that tank. G2, all G2 with 2 Reef leads. Is this good enough for SPS? Probably, yeah. There was a guy, Sean at the Ocean Project, ran, I think it was a 4-foot tank with SPS corals with 4, I think, Reef lead 90s. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that would be absolutely fine. But get a par meter, a semi par meter to check. But I'd be surprised if that's not enough. They're strong enough lights, so that should be absolutely fine. Do par settings in manufacturer spec sheets refer to par when the lights are turned up to 100%, or is there some other formula? I bet it varies from brand to brand, but a lot of brands, it will tell you, if you look on the small print, it will say these measurements are taken in an empty tank, so there's no water in it, and that gives you completely different results. When I've done that, it gives you much lower par, actually. So I don't know. If you normally Google around a little bit, and the only time I've ever done this was the Reef Factory when I did the review for the light, that they will tell you somewhere on their website, it will say the test conditions that they set out. But I tend to ignore company spec sheets. I'd rather watch the BRS videos. They were much better, much more reliable and believable position. And it's not that necessarily that these guys are lying to you. It's just that they always use different methodologies. So I don't know. Have you ever thought of doing a Reef Dork meetup thing? No, I haven't. I like the idea of it, but I don't know what that would look like. If it was just a simple, hey, let's get together at a location, a venue, and have a drink and have a chat, maybe that's too basic. And if it was something more advanced, it would be too much effort, and I don't have time. But no, like the idea, but never done it. What brand are you using for ATO? I have 2, and they're both Tunzi osmolators, the nano and the normal one. The nano is actually a bit rubbish, to be honest. It doesn't have the redundancies. But the other one I had before that was Refloat, and they were fine. I had them for a few years, 2 maybe. They were fine as well. But the Tunzies, I prefer the Tunzi. Pump's noisy though, so if it's in your bedroom, factor that in. I do what Reef Talk does. All blues and violets are high. I even sprinkle some red and green, and then use white to control aesthetically what look good to my eye. That I think is the best way to do it. I think ignore all the other noise. That's the best way to do it. Another great live chat. Another great live. And one last thing, you're talking about citric acid for a second-hand tank. Fine, you're talking to someone else. Another great live, buddy. Cheers. Right. Thank you very much, guys. We will wrap it up there unless I get a comment in the next few seconds. Let's take a sip of my drink. Dramatic effect. And there is no comment. So thank you very much for joining. Next week, I might have a guest. We'll see. I'll confirm later. But if I do have a guest, it'll be a very good guest indeed. And I will look forward to it very much. So good night. Thank you very much for coming along. See you next week.